Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jo Dossiter, and I'm a member of the online conference team. And it's my pleasure to introduce now Catherine Morley to this session, Interactive Assessment Online. Catherine has been teaching English to children and adults since 2001 in Spain and in Mexico. And she currently manages the British Council Spain's national online courses for young learners, and that is a big growth area from the last couple of years. So without further ado, I will just mention that this session is being recorded. You do have the option to open your cameras and mics, but we would ask during the presentation if you could turn your mics off. But when we come to the question and answer section, you can obviously turn those on again. And also, as we go through the talk, if you have a question, please just put it in the chat, and then we will have time for questions and answers at the end. So thanks very much for coming along, everyone. And now I'm going to hand it over to Catherine.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks very much for coming along, especially if you've been going to other sessions all morning today. So let's make a start with the session, and let's see how we go via potential technical issues. I'm actually sharing things from two different computers for a variety of technical reasons here, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, great. So I think we can see the PowerPoint there, so that's something at least. Yeah, so I mean, this is really the focus of our talk today, and I think here, well, we're talking about assessment in the very broadest sense of the word, which is really, finding out, first of all, where students are at currently in terms of the different skills. And in the plenary earlier on, I think that there was some very nice points about formative assessment. So Mina was talking about classroom-based assessment to improve the teaching and learning process. So, it's, as I said, finding out where students are in terms of the different skills and whether they've learnt what we want them to be learning and what we need to kind of come back to and revisit, etc. And also in that session, people were talking about the importance of assessing speaking and listening. So those are also some of the things that we're going to be talking about in this session. And the session's called Interactive Assessment Online. So we're also just thinking about some tools to make sure that our online classes are interactive. Okay, so I would like you please to go to the website slido.com, and you'll then need to type in this numerical code here. And I'd like your ideas about what are some of the challenges of assessment in online classes. So you can just write a sentence there and those things will come up on the screen. So that's slido.com. If you can go to that. And then the code you need is 585636. getting all students to focus. Someone has said there. Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yes, the difficulties of assessing reading, technical issues. Of course, technical issues are a challenge in every aspect in online classes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Definitely these kind of distractions that can be going on for our students as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, definitely. I like this one about being able to listen to individuals for speaking assessment, listening to the students. Someone else has said that as well, and making sure you've got these opportunities to produce language. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so you're going in and out of those different breakout rooms, and you don't have, so when the students are in breakout rooms, you don't have that kind of same overview of the whole class that you have in that in the physical face-to-face classroom. Exactly. Exactly. You can't monitor everyone all at once. Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, these are a lot of the issues that always come up. You know, when teachers of online classes are talking together about some of these difficulties. Now, this tool, Slido.com, have you used this before? You could just tell me yes or no in the chat. Okay, there's a couple of no's there. Okay. Okay, right. So Sheila says you've used Mentimeter. Yeah, it does do a lot of similar things actually to Mentimeter. And I saw that somebody asked there about is it free? And yes, it is to a limited extent. I mean, I'm using the free version here. And what I like about this is that it's integrated with PowerPoint. And so for those of you who are, if you're a British Council teacher, you won't be able to integrate it with PowerPoint if you're using a British Council computer, which is actually why I'm using two computers today. But if you have PowerPoint on your own computer, it's like you can download an add-on to PowerPoint, which is free, um, and then that means that when you're working on a PowerPoint slide, one of the options you have is to include a Slido poll, or there's various formats. In fact, I'm going to be using another format a little bit later on in this session. But well, obviously with students, I mean, obviously it's great just for kind of brainstorming ideas about whatever your topic is. But actually students can, you know, they can go back and edit their answers kind of live. And so sometimes, you know, if I've asked students a question and then I've kind of just noticed a mistake as it's kind of coming up, and, you know, I just might say like, oh, how do you spell that? So, you know, and the student can actually go back in real time and edit what they've written, so then they're correct, the corrected version appears instead. So for doing kind of some of that on the spot error correction in real time as well, it can be it can be quite nice. And so I think, yeah, this is a nice tool for making classes interactive. And obviously there's lots of tools, and we're going to look at a few more tools today. Okay, so Slido and Mentimeter, which Sheila mentioned, which does have a lot of similar kind of functions. So these were a few of the things that we're going to look at today. So could you just say in the chat, you know, which, if there's any of these that that you've used, or also feel free to ask any questions, but we're going to look at these tools later. So could you just tell me in the chat any that you've used? Okay, great. So Claire's used Google Forms, WordWall. Donna's used WordWall. Sheila says Google Forms as well. Okay, yes. Flipgrid as well. A few people have mentioned there. Edpuzzle, WordWall. Okay, fantastic. So we're going to have a look at a few of these things. Okay, so the reason that I've got Microsoft Forms here, this is because in the British Council, in our kind of suite of programs that we have Microsoft Forms, and so we're very much encouraged to use that. But I think Google Forms has a lot of the same functionality. And so, you know, if we're thinking back to the challenges of assessment in the online classes, it can be this, you know, the difficulty of, as somebody said, not being able to monitor all the students at the same time. And in that way, where, for example, you know, in a primary classroom, they're perhaps doing, you know, they're doing an activity from the book, or they're doing, you know, a very short, like writing a few sentences about their family or whatever. And, you know, you're going and you're just kind of looking over their shoulder, and you know, you might not correct everything that every student does in every piece of writing, but you're certainly kind of getting that feel and getting an idea of what different students can do, and that's what can be more difficult in an online class. So this was just some of these examples. You know, could be a way of getting the answers from all the students in the class, so you can really see how they're all doing, or getting all the students in the class to do a short piece of writing. And these forms that we're going to look at now, or these two primary forms, these were put together by my colleague Suzanne Anderson. So let me just go to... Okay, so yeah, so for example, this was one that Suzanne had put together, and partly to show the different question types that you can use in Microsoft Forms. So obviously, where you've got, you know, true false questions, and you've got questions where the students have to write their answer. And you know, there's even things where students can upload a file, for example, but also giving their opinion about the article. So not just factual questions. Can you find out 2 more interesting facts about Wales? So a way of getting answers from all students in an online class. And you know, in this case, it's not about you know, the answers to an exercise. In this case, it is about students doing some writing and finding out you know, how they're doing in terms of being able to use the language that they've been looking at in class recently. So yeah, so just a way of getting that work from every student in the class, and getting, you know, really more of a feel about who's got it, who needs a bit more help, or maybe everybody needs more work on this language. And this was one I just put together, but it was really the only reason I'm showing it now is to show that, you know, you can use this in a way that doesn't really take you, you know, it hardly takes you any time at all. And in this case, this was for just a CAE class where the students have got the course book. So, you know, I don't need to type out the questions because they've got the questions in front of them. And so this one was, you know, really, really quick. Really, really quick and simple to make. But again, it's just a way of getting the answers from all the students in the class. So, you know, you're kind of avoiding that issue of only the strongest students speak up. And then, you know, it can be easy to assume that everybody's fine, everybody's got it. And in fact, there's those students who can kind of hide a little bit in an online class, which, you know, as we know, there's students who don't like to speak up in a face-to-face class either. And you also have to be, you know, careful about being led too much by the most dominant students. But I think it's even easier for some students to kind of hide in an online class. So in this case, then you can at least see how everybody is doing. And so, yeah, so a few of these things that, you know, that I want to look at are really with that idea of making sure that you can see how everybody is doing in the class, because this is something that's like consistently come up from the teachers as something that's a bit more difficult, and that it takes them, you know, from when they get a new group of students and from the first term, it takes them much longer to really get a feel for you know, who's doing well and who's struggling. And so some of you mentioned word wall, that you've used that before. So yeah, this is a really great tool for online classes. Well, I'm sure some of you have used this a lot more than me. It's true that the free version, I think you only get something like 4 activities maybe that you can make yourself. However, there's lots of community activities. So as a teacher then, you have to create an account. So here I'm logged in. I've got my activities here, but I've just got a couple of things there. One is a kind of a teacher training type of thing. As I said, I think it's 4 free things that you can get. But if you go to community, this is where you can find various quizzes that other people have made. The great thing about WordWall is one of the great things is the variety of different formats that you've got. And there's all sorts of things. So you can, you know, for example, if you type in something like, well, I'm just going to put FCE speaking actually. You know, you'll find all sorts of things here, and these things can be great as a warmer, or if you have to cover a class at the last minute for an online class, these speaking activities, and where you spin the wheel and it comes onto a speaking activity, and then the students have to speak about that. But what another thing, that's just to show you what you can look for. Okay, if I want to look for conditionals, and obviously there's loads of different activities here with conditionals. But what I actually wanted was called conditional quiz, I think. Let's have a look. So we can see there's lots of conditional quizzes here. Maybe it was called conditionals quiz. Let's try that. So again, there's a few different things here, and I think this was the one that I'd actually used with these students. So, you know, there's various things that you can do here with WordWall. I mean, you could do this activity as a whole class. You can just send students the link, and they could work together on it in breakout rooms. But if you want to find out how the different students are doing, so you want to know who is struggling with this language area and who's fine, who's got it already, then you do this set assignment here. Okay, we want them to enter a name, and if we do a leaderboard, that means also that they can see who's doing well and so on. And so this generates a link here. So so I would give this link to my students, and they go off and they individually do that conditionals quiz. And then in my results, it was here. This is one I did a while ago, and you can see the students' results there, which I've also got on here as well. So that's, you know, to give you kind of an idea of how students are doing. And now I had actually ticked there. I had ticked the leaderboard box, which means that then students would also see, you know, if how they're doing. So, you know, that's something you might want to do that sometimes, and they see who was the winner or whatever. But other times you might think, oh, you don't want the students to, you know, you don't want to have that kind of competitive thing, or those who are a bit slower or whatever, struggling with it. But you want to know, so then you could untick that leaderboard option, but you would still get that information yourself about how the students are doing. Okay. So I mentioned, you know, getting the answers from everybody, and just again, rather than through the chat, except through the chat or through the microphones, those kind of more dominant students who might well be the stronger students answering questions, and you know, we don't necessarily know where the other students in the class are and how they're doing. So these were some ideas, and these ideas mainly come from the British Council teachers, from when we've had some of our like training sessions and our collaborative teachers room sessions, which are kind of ideas sharing sessions that the teachers attend. And these ideas are kind of gathered together from there. So if you could just take a moment to read those. Okay, so these were a few ideas. And here, hopefully, if this works on our next slide, then yes, okay, so I'd like you to go back to the Slido. It's with the same number here. And just let me know which of these methods you've already used with your students, and you can vote for more than one of them. So if you could go back to that Slido, that would be great. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. So there's a few of those that you've used already. So that's great. So, you know, I think this is just, yes, just to kind of really think about getting that kind of feedback from everyone in the class and how are they doing. And so, you know, rather than students kind of copying from others in the chat, or sometimes we don't know if that's what they've actually done, but they may have done that. And just so that we know how they're doing. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and so I was interested to know any other methods that you might have for collecting answers from everyone in the chat. So sorry, not necessarily in the chat, but from collecting answers from everyone in the class. And you could let us know those in the chat, but I'm also going to give you, this is kind of, you know, for the end of the talk today as well, but I'm going to give you the link to it in a moment. You know, maybe suddenly at some point during this session, you know, something occurs to you that you think, oh, that's a good idea to share with other people or whatever. Then you could stick a note on our notice board here. And, you know, later on, you can also stick on a note saying what you'd like to try out from this talk. So I'll give you the link in a moment, but the way this works then is that, you know, you just, okay, so a blue sticky note, you just type whatever you want on it here, test, and post, okay? So I'm gonna get rid of that one, and then I'm going to give you the link. So feel free, just gonna stop sharing for a moment there, so that I can give you this link in the chat. So do feel free to add any more ideas on here. Okay, so just put this here for one moment. Okay, so I said I've seen that Dawn mentions mentions using the sticky notes. Okay, so I've put that link in the chat if you'd like to make any additions there. And yeah, in fact, that particular web page or Linoit, that was one of my British Council colleagues, Thomas McWhirter. I saw that in a session that he gave. So yeah, just kind of, you know, moving on to another few ideas here. So for our online classes in the British Council, then we've got kind of a shared Google Drive that we use. And, you know, so these examples, so for primary students, they are putting together a digital portfolio, because our primary students in our face-to-face classes, they put together, you know, a physical portfolio of the main pieces of work that they've done throughout the term. And really those are kind of like, you know, the final projects that they do at the end of one of the magazines, which is the British Council materials that we're using. So the final pieces of work from each magazine, where they're kind of, you know, pulling together what they've learned, both linguistically and, you know, factually and everything as well, what they've learned from that magazine, and they're kind of pulling that together in some kind of final project, which they might be working on, you know, collaboratively or individually. And so some of the teachers who've got the primary classes online have done this, have produced a digital portfolio. And these examples here, this was one of our British Council Teachers, who's based in Bilbao, Brigitte. And in this case, of course, this was for the online classes that she had. So she gave me permission to use some of these examples here from some of her students' work. So these were these are the older end of primary. Obviously, these were 10, 11-year-olds. And these were some of the pieces of work that they came up with. So then each student had their own digital portfolio, where they've got, they've not put in everything in it. It's just the main pieces of work. So they might just have like 3 or 4 pieces of work in there in a term, or even even just a couple of things for a term, but then they've got the portfolio for the whole year. So they're these these pieces of work that they've really like spent a lot of time on, and which kind of pulled together a lot of the language they've learnt. And then the nice thing was that the teacher was able to share the links to each student's portfolio in the end of term reports, so that the parents could click on that link and see their child's own work. We've also in our online classes been using the Google Drive a lot in general, because as well as these kind of portfolios for the primary students, well, our secondary students, when they're, because again, the focus of our secondary classes is very much this project-based learning. So when the students are doing the final project of one of the magazines, they would be working together to produce like a presentation. So they're using Google Slides for that. So this is such a fantastic tool where you've got, maybe you've got these 3 different students working together in a breakout room, different locations, but they're able to edit that same presentation. And so that's what they're putting together, that final presentation for the end of the magazine. And the great thing about that for the teacher as well is that the teacher can kind of double monitor. So the teacher, and monitoring was one of the things that people mentioned earlier. So obviously the teacher can monitor by going into the breakout rooms. But at the same time, the teacher can also monitor by looking at the Google Slides that the different groups are working on, so they can see if a group hasn't done anything yet, and go into that breakout room to see are they working on it, do they need more help, hurry them along a little bit. Another group you might see like, whoa, they're doing this really well, I'll just leave them to get on with it for a bit longer. So this is a really really important tool for our online classes. Have any of you used this website, Write and Improve? No? So this is, we'll have a look at it. I've got it open here. This is, here we go, Write and Improve. So they are lots of, writing tasks that are kind of exam type writing tasks, where you can see over here it refers to IELTS, but there's lots of Cambridge exam type writing tasks as well. Now, the way this works is that basically students can do a piece of writing answering one of the tasks on here, and they can get some feedback. So I think Dawn said there that that students, they've recommended it for students to use outside class. Yeah, definitely. Now, actually, one of our, perhaps you know about this, and please tell me if you do. One of our teachers told me that that students need to actually create an account in order to, it kind of looks like you can do it without creating an account, because for example, if I click on here and I do this and like, oh, okay, it says write your text here, and I'm not actually signed in here. it looks like you can, oh, just do your writing and you're going to get some feedback. One of our teachers told me that actually the students don't get any feedback unless they have actually created an account. So that would be something, I guess, to be careful of. But some of you may know Russell Stannard, who's a teacher trainer, teacher educator, who produces these videos for teachers, where he talks about different online tools for teaching and gives ideas for using them. And so in his video about Write and Improve, I really liked the idea that he talked about. So he talked about, you know, setting a specific task from this website for homework, you know, like this one here, an email, not being able to go to a party. It looks kind of fairly standard, maybe pet exam kind of stuff. So setting that, for example, for your students, and then getting them so that they then submit it and they get that feedback, which is basically the feedback on the surface mistakes, on the kind of the grammar and vocabulary mistakes, and only after doing that do they submit it to the teacher. So it's so that then the teacher can kind of concentrate on helping them more in terms of, for example, organisation, and they've already got that those kind of surface errors corrected. So I liked that idea as well. Okay, Flipgrid. Has anybody used this one? Well, one thing, you know, basically the idea here is that students can make, you know, a video response to a prompt. And, you know, somebody mentioned earlier about the difficulty perhaps of really assessing speaking when you're just kind of popping in and out of breakout rooms and you don't stay in any of them for, you know, for a very long time. So, you know, this is something that is one way of solving that problem. And you can do this, you can create a class on Flipgrid in such a way that students don't have to create an account, because that is something that can be problematic, certainly for us in the British Council. You know, we can't really ask students to join platforms where they have to create an account. So for example, here I've created this group called First Certificate. And I created myself the members of the group, so I could add more members here if I wanted. And I've just put their first name and their first initial. So obviously then I would tell students, right, your username is your first name and your first initial. So if I create a task here that I want students to respond to, then I've got this here, which is to share. Okay, I can copy the link there. And then, so, okay, so let's see, Alva Rossi, I'm going to be Alva Rossi. So I've got this link here. Okay, so this will take me here. If I want to add a response, okay, well, it won't let me do that. But basically, oh, okay, I think it's because I'm logged into my Google here. But what, so it's actually recognised that it's me. But if that wasn't the case, it asks for the username. And as long as students know that their username is their first name and their first initial, then that's what they put in. And they don't need to create an account. They don't need to give an email address or anything like that. So that's really important. So then what students can do, if I've got kind of tasks that I've created for them, So this was just me making a silly response to it. But in this case, for example, you've got your typical first certificate part 2 speaking task, speak for 1 minute. And so students would then add their video response. And you can comment on it and other students can comment on it. Another idea for this, and this was this was another topic, and I mean, I've just put this topic here because it occurred to me because it's one of the British Council magazines that we use, which is all about water and saving water, etc., etc. When I was initially doing some research for this talk, and I was watching some videos and so on about assessments, and one of the videos and assessment online in particular, and I watched a webinar which was about assessments in mainstream education rather than ESL, and an idea that they talked about there that I really liked. They talked about what they called a brain dump. So the idea being that the only way you can really assess learning and the effectiveness of your teaching as well is if you know where students were at the beginning of, let's say, covering a particular topic and where they are at the end of that topic. So, what's the learning that's taken place? If you don't know where they are at the beginning, it's very hard to know how effective that teaching has been, whether you need to continue doing more teaching on that topic or not, or whether they're fine. So the idea of the brain dump was, for example, let's say if you're teaching a history lesson about the Second World War, then the students would do a brain dump about the Second World War, which would mean they, in some format, so in this case, recording a video, the student would say everything they already know about the Second World War. Then, over a series of lessons in their history classes, they learn about the Second World War. And then at the end of that series of lessons, they do another brain dump. And so this is where, both the student and the teacher can really see the difference, hopefully, in terms of what they've learned on that topic. So in the context of EFL, then, I think this could be a useful concept, and especially as like a lot of certainly our materials that we're using in the British Council are also topic based, content based. So if you get a student to make a recording before you cover that topic, and this is all about, why is it important to save water, etc. What can we do to save water at home and at school? So students make that initial recording, and we'll see what language they already have to talk about that topic, as well as their knowledge of the topic. That's also important. But we'll see, how much they're able to talk about that topic. And then we have the teaching on that topic. And then finally at the end, they would make another video. So, this is this idea of really seeing the learning that has taken place. Also we haven't got that long left, so I'm going to move on. Rockaroo, you might also know, and this was to make voice recordings. So again, this was, getting your student to make a 1 minute recording for that first certificate part 2, for example, and then they can just they can send you a link to their recording. So this is a really great platform for that as well. We won't have a look at that. Line we mentioned, because I've got the one here for you to to write on, and some people mentioned this in the chat as well. You know, I found when I've used this with students, and this was an example here, that again, students can do some self-correction a little bit, because then you can, you know, you'd say, oh, you've, well, you need to use the past there or whatever. Oh, right, okay, yes, and go back and doing that self-correction. So in fact, that's why these examples here are all pretty much correct, because those students, you know, with a little bit of prompting, were able to go back and self-correct their own work. And yeah, we won't have time to do this one, but this is a fantastic platform. I think some of you said you knew it already, but basically where you can set some questions on a YouTube video. And so any YouTube video that you want, and it pauses for students to then answer the question. So it's kind of like simultaneously you would share a link with students, and they it plays the first part of the video, it pauses for the question, and you can see, oh, 6 out of 7 students have answered, 7 out of 7, or maybe it says 6 out of 7, and you think, well, let's just move on anyway. Just a hint for this, you have to create a class. You need to set your class to open. Again, this is in order to that you just share a link with students and they can join. They're not asked for any logon details. So that's something that's quite important there. So I think I had better finish there. Okay, so these were some of the ideas that we've looked at. So well, let's just see, I guess, if we have any questions just for the last couple of minutes.
That's brilliant, Catherine. Thank you so much. Those were some really wonderful tools that you've shown there. And what I really liked as well is you just seamlessly integrated all of those into the presentation to make it particularly interactive as well. So I think we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So I'm just looking up there. So for example, we had a question from Marielle saying, how do you handle it when a student doesn't share their answers, and how can you then encourage them to participate more in class?
Hi, Marielle. So yeah, so I guess, Marielle, you mean like if you have asked everybody to give you an answer and then they just don't do it?
Exactly, yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a tricky one, because obviously if you're using all these different techniques and, you know, you're really trying to get them to do that. So you know, I think, like, obviously you would try and just have a chat with that student as the first stage of that, I think. I mean, and I suppose at least when you're doing these things where you're collecting, you know, these answers from everybody, it does at least become obvious, doesn't it? Who are those, you know, those few
exactly.
students who are really not participating, even when you're really pushing them to. So, you know, yeah, I think obviously then you just need to have that conversation with them as an initial step. But then, you know, if we're talking about young learners, there's going to come a stage where you really just kind of need to get the parents on board as well, don't you, to make sure that they're the students making the most of the class.
Yeah,
thanks, Catherine. We've got another question with regard to Flipgrid, because you mentioned that you can record videos and that the students don't need to have their own login. But in terms of sort of data protection, if they're uploading their own videos, is that an issue and a problem that you need to think about in terms of sharing videos? Is there a way of only maybe sharing audio, for example?
Well, you know, I think, like, for example, the Vocaroo would be the platform where, well, where they might be able to kind of share audio with you. But yeah, it's true that those are for different things in a way, because the Vocaroo platform, they wouldn't really be sharing it with other people. They would be just sharing it with themselves. So I think, you know, Flipgrid is video, but you know, I think you can like turn the camera off or cover the webcam, and in that way just have it as audio, but it is intended as video.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Catherine. Do we have time for one more question, either in the chat or by enabling your camera and your mic?
There's a couple of things actually on the line away here with the, so somebody's asked with Google Forms, does every student have to have a Google email account? No, I don't think so. I mean, I've used the Microsoft Forms more, but they certainly don't need to have an account there. So with Google Forms, you'd have to check that, but I'm pretty sure that you don't. And that's the thing, you know, with these Google tools, you've got to be really careful that you're, you know, for example, with the Google Slides we use, there's a certain way that you share that document with students where it's, you know, anyone on the internet with the link can access this document and anyone can edit it, so that the students are not asked to log into or create a Google account. So you've got to be careful with that. And someone else has said here, yeah, you can share a Google document and the students type their answers, brainstorming ideas directly onto the Google document. Yeah, definitely. So that's another way of getting those ideas from everybody.
That's brilliant, Catherine. There's loads of ideas there. I really like the practical emphasis in your talk. It was extremely useful. So just time really to say thanks to everyone for attending this session, and hopefully some of the other sessions today in the online conference. It's been a really excellent conference today, really wonderful time to reflect. That's the theme of this year's conference, Reflective Teacher, Reflective Learner. So yeah, thanks to everybody. And as you can see in the chat above, there is a Padlet page where we'll be sharing materials from the presenters. So thank you very much to Catherine and to attendees, and we hope to see you at another British Council event very soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.